I was trying to figure out what my favorite piece of gear is. I wanted to like create a video on my favorite piece of equipment, and I was thinking, okay, what actually is my favorite piece of guitar related gear? And at some point I just looked at, okay, what am I using, for most of the time? And what I'm using every day is the Two Notes Torpedo Captor X.
Okay. Yep.
Because it's like, so that essentially, for those who are not familiar with Two Notes or the Torpedo Captor, so let's say you have a tube amp or any kind of guitar amp for that matter, and you want to crank the amp and you want to play at home and everything. There are a couple of things you can do. You can play at bedroom level, which is not always exciting with some of the amps. Maybe with the Vox AC50 it is, but not all the amps. Not all the amps do it. So you can get an attenuator, like a classic. Marshall has the Power Break, or had the Power Break. There are a couple of alternatives right now for an attenuator. Problem is, a lot of attenuators are not reactive, so they just shut down the signal coming in, and all the energy that's produced is being like turned into heat and then kind of blown out with a small vent. So you have that, but the other thing is, maybe you want to record something directly into your audio interface. So essentially, the Captor X is an attenuator. It's a cabinet simulator as well. And I mean, Two Notes has a huge library of different IRs, and I think the biggest, they kind of invented that hardware category, if you want so, like 10, 12 years ago. And the other thing is, you also get, if you have your own IRs, you can also put in your own impulse responses. I don't think it's necessary, because the difference with the IRs that Two Notes creates is you can, you choose a cabinet and you choose a microphone that you like, and you can directly change the position and the distance and everything, and that works really, really well. And the other thing is that you also get a couple of post effects. So even if you're not like happy with the result, there are a couple of things you can do to actually work with the signal before you send it, I don't know, into active speakers or your headphones, whatever. And I'm using this thing every day when I'm picking up my guitar, and the only thing I can use is a set of headphones or active speakers, because I don't know, the family isn't happy with the noise, or the neighbors are.
Yeah.
If I want to record stuff, then I'm using it. I'm just using my amp, and I can really crank it up to like the sweet spot and use this. And when I just finished a batch of pedals and I want to quality test them and see if everything works before I put them into the boxes and ship them out, then that sometimes happens, or most of the time happens, in the evenings. And the only way I can really dial in tones and see if everything works, if I can, crank them up, which I can't do at 10 o'clock. Okay. But thanks to the Torpedo Captor X, I can. So these are my positive picks as recent gear experiences.
Got a question for you, because you're using the Captor X and I have the Captor 16.
Yeah.
And I remember asking you if there was a huge difference between the both of them, like whether I should upgrade to the Captor X. And I believe you said yes, but could you expand on like maybe the differences between this one? Because the Captor 16, Captor 8, those are still sold, so you can still buy them. But for someone who's like looking online and thinking like, should I go with the one that's more affordable, or should I go with the latest thing? Like, what's your opinion on this?
To me, the clear differences have to do with the sort of application that you need them for. So if you are only recording at home, I think the regular Captor without the X, like the Captor 8 or Captor 16, would be enough, because you'll get the signal from your amplifier into a digital audio workstation, or audio interface, digital audio workstation. But then you need to rely on something like the wall of sound plugin to then work with impulse responses, or any other program for that matter, whatever you use to load impulse responses. But obviously, wall of sound is the one that Two Notes does. So a lot of people are using that. Now, let's say you are using this whole thing within a live context, and you might want to, play directly into the mixing desk. Then the Captor X really comes in handy because you have 6 available presets on the front, which you can choose from. If you are using a setup where you have MIDI involved, you could actually change presets. So let's say you have a sound that is, more Fender-y, kind of, and you have a sound that's more Marshall-y, when we're talking about Lees. You could use different cabinets for that, or different cabinet simulations. That to me is definitely a huge advantage. So there are a few controls that you have on the front of the Captor X that the Captor 16 does not have. So not only can you control the headphone or general output level, but you can also change directly between the first 6 presets. And you have a thing called space, which kind of brings in the amount of like room ambience that is chosen with each cabinet simulation. And and there's also a voicing control, which goes from like kind of open, a little bit more mid-focus, to something that is like a little bit more hi-fi.
Okay.
So if you want to make adjustment, because sometimes it's actually desirable, depending on the location you're in, or in the room, or the circumstances, to have a sound that is a bit more mid-focused, or vice versa.
Yep.
Yeah. So there's more control. So I would say that the Captor X is a lot more versatile for whatever you do, while the Captor 16 is definitely more of a studio tool to me, or a home recording tool to me.
That makes sense, because with the Captor 16, you only have 2 choices, one for guitar and one for bass.
Yeah.
And the one for guitar, I believe, is a 4x12, and if I remember right, it's supposed to be based on greenbacks.
Yes.
And the one for bass, I'm not certain what it is.
I think it's a 4x10 or 8x10, something like that.
Yeah. But I mean, they still sound good, but you don't have the flexibility of using other IRs, or you're confined to those 2, which I mean can be fine if you don't need to tweak a whole lot of parameters. But in the case of the X, what is it, like a €200, maybe €300 difference between both units?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it's not. I don't think it's enough of a difference to say, okay, why not just go directly with the Captor X? For the additional amount of features you get, I think it's definitely worth it.
So it's more of a feature pack rather than, the X sounds far better than the 16. So it's not like a sound thing. It's more of a flexibility. No. Okay, I get you.
Yeah, it's definitely a feature thing. And to me, it's like, if you want to use something like that live, and I mean, you could do both things. You could connect this to the mixing desk and give your audio engineer, like your live engineer, a perfectly, adapted, fully, almost like produced signal, and he just, goes loud and more or less volume within the mix, and you could still have your cabinet on stage. But if you are in a situation where you can only use an amp, but you can't use a cabinet on stage because it's a silent stage for some reason, because there's sensitive instruments involved, like a small orchestra or something. You could just get away with take your amp, take your Captor X, and go directly into the mixing desk. And in those cases, you usually have like some kind of in-ear or something. You could get away with this and still be happy.
And you were talking about Wall of Sound. I believe that one comes included with the
Yeah.
purchase. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Have you tried anything else? Like personally, I've been like migrating towards the Celestion Speaker Mix Pro for like the last year or so.
Okay.
And basically, it's an architecture that is similar to Wall of Sound,
Okay.
but they've developed their own technology. So they call it DSR, I believe it's called. It's dynamic IRs, if you will. And you can mimic a lot of the characteristics of a moving speaker, because usually the problem with the impulse response is that you're getting a static image or sonic equivalent of an image of a particular rig. And in this case, what they've done is that you can mimic the like the friction of the speaker, like the way it resonates in the cabinet. Like there's a bunch of parameters they put in there. Now, how much most people can hear that difference, I don't know. But it's there just in case you like to fine tweak those things, just to give it more of a like real world sound. But in a mix, I've found that I don't really hear those differences. It's too nuanced to make a huge comparison between the both.
I have not made any other experiences, so I'm using either the Wall of Sound. If I'm using a plugin, I'm using the Wall of Sound one, which at some point is going to be replaced with, they're working on something new, and it's going to replace that, because Wall of Sound is like, I believe, like 10, 12 years old now. So
yeah, something like that.
They are definitely going to update that whole thing very soon. But I haven't used anything else, to be honest. I mean, there are these typical IR loaders, which some of them are actually free, free plugins, and you just put the IR in. But the thing that you described with what Celestion did, it's something that I'm totally used to when working with Wall of Sound, or with the editor that comes with the Captor X, which is like a sort of a remote software. You have all these options in there as well. Maybe not some of the things that you said about, how the cabinet kind of
the resonance of the cabinet note,
something like that. But it's something that I can feel the Two Note stuff does naturally. So if I have the pedal board in front of the amp, and I'm stacking a couple of drives or boosts or whatever, I can hear those exact changes within the IRs that Two Notes does.
Okay. I got a question for you, because as we're talking, I'm like thinking about things that I go through as a musician. So we both have YouTube channels. We both have done like a lot of demos. Have you ever found that people have an issue with you using IRs for your demo? No, because I've had a lot of comments where people say, you're not giving a good rendering or a good impression of the tone because you're not using an actual mic in front of a speaker, because you're going digital. And I always found it kind of weird as a statement, because then I'm using a computer that's turning the analog signal into ones and zeros, and then I'm converting it and uploading it to YouTube, where they're watching it on their phone. Like, there's so many conversions of digital all along the way, right? And I'm thinking, what does it really matter, though? And I guess the argument that some people make is that because there's an actual speaker moving air into the microphone, somehow magic happens there. And I've recorded like tons of music over the years, and I've never had anyone say, John, that song would have been much better if you didn't use IRs. That's never happened.
But that's the age old discussion. Well, it's not the age old discussion, but it's like it's the old thing that happens when you start putting out stuff on YouTube. In the beginning, everything's fine, everybody likes it, and I think the bigger you get, and we're not even close to some of the guys who we maybe watch here and there, some of the guys that have like 10,000s or 100,000s of followers, who are being exposed to like a ton of comments that go in the same direction, like your playing is not authentic, or your tone is not authentic. But to me, so I never had that issue. I never ever did anyone say you sound less real because you're using this and that and whatnot. So
Yeah.
That never happened to me. And to be honest, I'm not really sure I would respond to these comments, because it's like, what's the point? You know, you're discussing something that is so subjective to the ear, to the ears, and to how the ears process.
Yeah.
You're discussing this with someone who who you don't know at all, and who has like a complete different kind of subjective impression of that same thing. If a mixing engineer with years of experience and a really trained ear tells me, you know, I'd rather use a mic'd cabinet and a cranked amp in my extremely well-treated recording room instead of using UIRs, I'm like, yeah, sure, let's do it. You know, it's not even a discussion. It's like, if he thinks it sounds better. But two people, one who is creating something and the other one who's consuming it and deciding that within his impression, subjective impression of the thing, it's not as real. Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like,
there's a point you just made that I think kind of settles the argument. It's that you said, if you deal with an engineer that wants to mic up a cranked amp in a well-treated room,
yeah,
how many people have those? I don't.
No.
Right?
It's the same reason people like. I once had a discussion with someone who was telling me like, because I have like a set of studio monitors here to obviously, you know, mix things and listen to things and blah blah blah. And then he was telling me about like, oh yeah, and he has this like great subwoofer along with the two monitors. And I said, well, do you have a treated room? And he said like, what do you mean treated room? It's like, if you have a subwoofer, at some point you can actually make things worse for you and for your judgment in if the mix is good or not. If you add a subwoofer, but that it's obviously going to mess with what you're hearing in the room. And he says like, no, it's like, that's right, my room is my room. I'm like, okay, maybe you should rethink that. As like, I never had a treated room anywhere. I mean, I once had a recording studio together with a friend, and we had the engineering room treated so that we knew what was going on. And there we had a subwoofer placed exactly where it's supposed to be so we can judge our mixes. But every time I'm in here, I'm used to the two monitors I have, and I know what they're doing. And if I'm not sure, I have this thing here. It's the DT77 770 Pro, which is great for low frequencies. So, you know, in order to judge like low frequencies and basses and bass drums and whatnot, and their impact on the overall mix, this thing is better than putting a subwoofer into an untreated room.
The way I counter all of this now, so just a bit of background before I say what I'm going to say, is that I studied audio engineering in 2011 in Vancouver. Mm-hmm. Now the school now is shut down, and the studio that the school was annexed with is also shut down. So the school was called Pacific Audiovisual Institute. Okay. And the studio that was with it was Blue Wave Studio. Now the corner where this was at, all the big studios in town were all like at walking distance from one another. Okay. So I studied there. I got to, meet a lot of great engineers, and they all said the same thing. Like, if you're recording in a really crappy room, you can have the best preamps, the best microphone, and the best of intentions. But if you don't know the room, you might not get the results you want, because no matter how much you put that microphone like up close to the grill, you're still picking up the room. Yeah. So if there's standing waves and, there are peaks that are getting, amplified, like here I'm in a small square room, right? And you're going to hear that through the microphone. Right. Now, if I'm to put a mic here in front of this, that's coming through. Like you get that short room reverb in all my stuff. Yeah. So I've found that if you use something like the Captor or the Captor X, you get to negate that part of the equation.
Yes.
So you get rid of all the sonic issues of mixing in an untreated room or recording in an untreated room. So what I do is I record that, and then with my DAW, I look at the with a spectrum analyzer, I look at the frequencies, and I can tell, like, if I'm just recording with a normal microphone, I can see all the peaks and dips and all this stuff.
Right.
But because I'm going through with the captor, I don't have those issues. So I'm thinking to myself, if I'm to try to give the most accurate representation of what a mic and a cab sound like in a good room, I might as well go that route, because if I do it in this room with a real microphone, it's going to sound like crap, and whatever I'm demoing, I'm not doing it justice.
No.
So that's my thinking behind it. But I think some people are still stuck to the idea that digital is completely bad and we have to avoid it. But like I said earlier, it's going through so many processes of being converted to digital that in the end, they're listening to it via Wi-Fi or whatever on YouTube, compressed in the whole thing. And I find the argument of putting the microphone there kind of like old school. Do we really need to do that anymore? You know, if you can and you're good and you got the treated room, thumbs up. I wish I could still do that because I love miking up an amp, right? But just for the sake of giving a consistent, like, reference tone, I'd rather go this way. So I know some people are not happy with that, but I think like users like yourself and me and others, we've gone that route because it just makes things not only easier, but much more consistent and reliable.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I fully agree. And I'd always go that way, instead of, because we also have to look at the cost of those things. You know, first you need a room. Having the room, having the space to do this is one thing. And then treating a room properly, it's not just about putting some foam into the corners and the wall. No, it's like somebody who really knows their stuff has to go in there and measures the room, not only the dimensions and everything, but acoustically. So somebody's really testing the room on its acoustics and how all of the frequencies behave within the room. And then that's like one part of the job. And then this person actually creates what kind of treatment needs to be made. And this can get really, really expensive. Really expensive.
Absolutely. Because there's things that we don't think about, like where you're placed in the room. Sometimes you can get like phase cancellation. That's where like the positive and the negative, and you could be sitting right in the middle of this and you're like amplifying frequencies that you can't hear because of where you're sitting. So now imagine someone's listening to a pedal that's being demoed and it's spiky in this frequency and everyone's saying, dude, it sounds like crap. What are you doing? And you're like, it sounds fine. What are you guys talking about? I'm sitting here. Yeah, go listen to your mix somewhere else and see what that sounds like. And that's where you see that you got acoustic issues. And like you said, like the foam doesn't stop the bad frequencies. It just kind of attenuates it, right? And that's all you can do, because real acoustic treatment, there's the other thing, is how loud can you put it in a room, right?
Yeah.
So we were talking like the sweet spot. What's a sweet spot of this 50-watt amp?